Hi everyone, this is Dayu from EcommOps. Today I wanted to talk about the coronavirus and its impacts on dropshipping. Now please note that this is focused on China fulfillment and the supply chain in China and not e-commerce in general. And this is also up to date as of March 6, 2020. And everything is always changing, so if you want more up-to-date information, please join our Facebook group linked in the description below for more updates. So we're going to talk about the current state of the supply chain in China. We're going to talk about the current state of logistics fulfilling from China and my own opinion on how this will impact dropshipping in the near and medium term. And then finally, how you should set up yourself for success right now before everything stabilizes. Alright, so let's start with the current state of the supply chain in China. And again, this is up to date as of March 6, 2020. So fortunately, the outbreak is starting to get contained and getting stabilized within China. Unfortunately, in the province of Hubei and surrounding areas where the epicenter was, there are still more and more cases. But generally speaking, most other provinces have it under control and they're decreasing cases every single day. In terms of human impact, so lots of clients and group members have been asking me and sending well wishes. So thank you very, very much for doing that. Obviously, this is a human tragedy outside of just the effect on the supply chain. Our friends and coworkers in China are all completely fine. So thank you for asking. But obviously, there are a lot of people affected. So it's obviously a very sad situation. And I don't want to just focus on the fulfillment aspect of it. So thank you guys for caring, and we all should care. But, again, let's focus on some of the business aspects of things. So in terms of the actual supply chain, most factories and suppliers are operational. There are still major restrictions within the epicenter, so the province of Hubei and a couple of surrounding regions. There are some factories there, but in terms of the supply chain, the vast majority of factories for dropshipping products and the agents or suppliers that fulfill them, they are concentrated around two areas. So on the East Coast, you have the area around Shanghai, Zhejiang, and Jiangsu. And then in the south, you have the area Guangdong and surrounding. That's where Shenzhen and Hong Kong are. So these two areas are mostly fine in terms of operations, although there are going to be some delays, and we'll talk about that in a bit. As I mentioned, even though most factories and suppliers are operational, they're still generally very, very limited. And this is because of two main reasons. So the first is most factory workers and fulfillment workers, they do not live in the city that they're working in. And traditionally speaking, Chinese New Year's has a lot of the workforce going back home, spending a few weeks or a month at home, and then coming back to the workplace. Traditionally speaking, there is already a very high turnover for these workers, anywhere between 10 to 50 or even 70% for some factories. And because of the coronavirus situation, there's a lot more folks that aren't coming back, or they aren't coming back in time due to a combination of increased travel restrictions, and some folks are maybe just concerned about the situation and not coming back or not coming back in time. So a lot of factories are working at very limited capacity, so do expect production delays all around, even if factories are operational. So usually if production might take 5 days or 10 days, we might expect 50% longer than that. Second, there are still quite a few restrictions in the workplace, even for companies and factories that have come back already. There are regular temperature checks for workers at the factories, and just generally, there are a lot of restrictions in terms of working. So with a combination of the decreased workforce and all of these restrictions, you are going to see a lot more capacity issues with these factories and fulfillment centers. So please expect at least some delays along the entire supply chain. It's hugely varied, so it just really depends on your product, on your factory, on your fulfillment center itself. Another issue that a lot of people don't realize is that local China logistics is still limited. Now remember, after something is produced from a factory, it still needs to get sent to a fulfillment center or to an agent or to an Aliexpress seller before it's actually sent. Now, unfortunately, the area Hubei and Wuhan specifically is traditionally a massive transportation hub. So a lot of local logistics travel through that area usually to get to another region. Now, as I mentioned before, there are two main regions of production and fulfillment in China. Now, if your factory and your fulfillment center are in the same region, then you're going to be less affected by this issue. But most of the time, especially as you're working with larger agents, you're going to have some products that are sourced from the other region that your agent is in, which means that normally it might take somewhere between 2 or 3 days to cross these regions, but now it might take 1 or 2 days extra. It might be not as consistent. The other way that you could do this is you can opt for a more expensive version of local logistics to get your products to the fulfillment center, but that does cost a little bit more, but that's something that you can speak to your agents about. All right, so then we'll talk about the current state of logistics fulfilling from China to around the world in the dropshipping model. And again, this is up to date as of March 6, 2020. So there continues to be disruptions due to a lot of flight situations. So there's two issues here. First of all, as most of you probably know, there is a huge amount of cancellations of passenger flights from China to around the world. And this has a significant impact on certain logistics services. Epacket particularly depends a lot on passenger flights, which means that you're going to see a lot more inconsistency and delays with, some routes might be delayed for, weeks or up to a month at a time. Now, I have heard anecdotally that certain routes, especially to the top 4 countries, US, Canada, Australia, UK, it is pretty consistent, but especially if you target other epacket countries, due to the lack of passenger flights, please expect delays, and sometimes they can be significant. And the other issue is that even for services that depend on freight planes, such as yunexpress, for example, that is going to experience some delays as well, but not as much. The reason why these have delays is these freight planes coming from China, they're going through a disinfection process before they leave the country. And that might add anywhere between half a day to 1 to 2 days to the process. Now, again, it's not going to be that significant, but sometimes it is going to add a little bit longer time than you previously expected using something like yunexpress. Please note, though, that in terms of the freight plane disinfection protocol, that's not affecting Hong Kong as of now. So if you use yunexpress and it's going through Shenzhen and going through Hong Kong, then you should expect that it's going to be much more stable. Related to that, obviously, if you have the choice to use an agent that's based in Shenzhen and sends yunexpress through Hong Kong, then obviously you should opt for that choice in order to have the most consistent deliveries. And another thing, as most of you have seen already, the coronavirus is starting to be a problem in other parts of the world. So far, the outbreak in northern Italy has already impacted a lot of local postal systems there. That has nothing to do with China fulfillment, but a lot of couriers are telling us do not send to Italy for now because it's going to get stuck because of a lot of the restrictions there. Now, we don't know exactly what's going to happen around the world, but it is very possible that there will be more and more outbreaks to many more countries around the world. So there might be more and more postal delays. Now, my own personal thought is that it's not going to be quite as bad, because I think that, Italy, not that what they're doing is wrong, but I think that they're taking a more extreme approach. But I do not think that even if outbreaks pop up around the world, that postal services around the world will be quite as impacted. But obviously, this is something that you should keep an eye on, and I'll continue to update you guys on if you join our Facebook group to let you guys know what countries might be affected in the future. All right, so now let's talk about my own opinion on the impact on the dropshipping industry, both now and in the short term coming up. And again, this is my own educated opinion. So you might ask, why should you trust me? We do actually run a China fulfillment service out of 2 regions. I'm Chinese. I have a lot of experience in China. I have a lot of friends and network in China, and I also have a lot of experience in e-commerce in general. So it's not going to be perfect, but I am able to provide an educated opinion on the situation right now. And again, this is updated as of March 6th. All right, so first on a macro level, e-commerce from China, importing from China is not going to die out, is not going to be impacted. The US alone in 2017 imported more than $500 billion of consumer products from China. And it should be more now, but that's the data that I found. And a few other notes here is that first, this does not really fully include dropshipping volume from China because a lot of that is not accurately reported. This is obviously just the US as well, so global number is going to be a lot higher. And e-commerce is not going to suddenly die out. People are still going to buy stuff from the internet. They're going to buy stuff from Shopify stores, from Amazon, etc., especially as the supply chain locally gets constrained because of all the issues shipping in bulk from China as well. Now, some of you might ask, okay, is this going to start moving production from China to elsewhere? It's really not possible. I mean, it'll take years, maybe a decade of time to really have significant moves from the supply chain into, from China into other countries. And it's just not really going to be a feasible solution anytime in the short term. And increasingly so, it does seem like this outbreak, although it's getting worse elsewhere, it should be able to stabilize within the next couple of months, especially because the coronavirus in general is very sensitive to heat. So as the weather gets warmer, I would expect to see it get better in general. So there's really no point for the entire supply chain and companies to start planning for a massive movement out of China for something that seems extreme right now, and it really is, but it's not going to last for years. And then finally, if we're talking about specifically China fulfilled stores, you guys actually do have somewhat of an advantage over locally fulfilled e-commerce stores. And that's because everyone is facing the same production delays within China, but you have to realize that locally fulfilled stores, on top of that, they're going to need 2 to 4 weeks or even longer to restock their warehouses, whereas China fulfilled warehouses are going to be restocked in a couple of days, which means that they'll start sending to customers faster, get tracking numbers faster. And if you're using a faster service like yunexpress, net speaking, you're going to actually get your products to your customers faster than if you were locally fulfilled and you had no stock. And obviously, as you guys know, in e-commerce, it is a little bit of a competitive game. So having an edge over certain stores as a China fulfilled store obviously gives you an edge. Sorry for those folks out there who do have locally fulfilled stores, but for those who have China fulfilled stores, you should have an edge in the near term at least. And I'll also speak to our direct experience. We have a lot of clients that we work with to fulfill their products. So from our experience, so first, most of our clients are turning on ads again, and they are spending profitably, and perhaps even more profitably than normally because a lot of stores probably paused or just stopped their operations because of the virus. So anyone who can get stock and run ads right now, you probably actually have an edge over others because of just the smaller amount of stores that you'd be competing with usually in a time like this. And then in terms of our own logistics supply chain, our packages are arriving on time. We might see some delays, but it's more like half a day or a day. But our yunexpress lines going through Hong Kong do seem completely normal. Now, again, this is just us. Every factory, every supplier is going to be a little bit different. It depends on where they're based and where they're sending from. So I give you guys the data point from us to let you guys know that at least in certain cases, it is coming back to normal, which obviously gives hope for the future. But again, do not take our situations as indicative of what's happening everywhere, with every agent, with every AliExpress seller, because again, every situation is going to be different. And one thing that I always tell our clients and group members during this situation is that yes, you guys have essentially maybe wasted 2 months of time with a combination of Chinese New Year's and this coronavirus situation. But do not forget that it's only March right now. And traditionally speaking, January and February are some of the slowest, lowest ROAS months in e-commerce anyways. The best months of the year are still coming up. Spring is coming up, summer's coming up, and obviously you have Q4 still coming up. So I know that a lot of you were impacted by this and a lot of you were stressed out by this, but do not forget the best months of the year are still coming up ahead. Now, obviously, we do not have 100% accurate information in terms of how the coronavirus situation is going to stabilize both in China and around the world. But again, traditionally, coronaviruses, SARS, for example, they're all a very similar type of virus. They are highly sensitive to heat. So I do really believe that as spring comes, as summer comes, more and more so, even if this will be a concern over the next month or so as it gets warmer, I do believe that it'll start getting more naturally contained. And that's actually exactly what happened to SARS. And that's actually exactly why when you get colds, usually you get them in the winter and colder months. And by the way, if you guys didn't know, a cold is actually a coronavirus as well. All right, so how do you set yourself up for success right now in the short term if you are a dropshipper depending on China fulfillment? So let's start with those of you who are using Aliexpress. Aliexpress, I have to admit, is a little bit all over the place because Aliexpress sellers, they're all around the country, that they use different factories, so it's going to be all over the place. First, this is more important more than ever, but this is actually always important. Be very careful on how you're picking the sellers that you're working with if you don't have one that you already trust. So I do have a link below with more information on how to pick Aliexpress sellers generally. Now, that's obviously more for general times, but it should apply here as well. But generally speaking, try to pick trustworthy Aliexpress sellers, big stores with a lot of reviews with very positive feedback, and we're communicative as well, and you should feel a lot safer with them in this situation to test, and they're going to be much more willing to tell you directly if they're open for business or if they're not yet. Second, where possible, try to opt for AliExpress standard shipping. It tends to be a little bit more expensive, and normally I don't really recommend it because it's kind of similar to epacket. However, the reason why it's better now because AliExpress standard shipping does not depend as heavily on passenger flights. They use a lot more freight lines. So to my point before, you really want to use services that use more freight lines, and on AliExpress, the affordable option for using freight lines is using AliExpress standard. So it'll be a bit more expensive, but most likely it's going to be worth it to make sure that you get your products to your customers on time. If you're using a private agent or a private supplier, given the production situation and increasing demand from sellers, there is a huge rush to grab inventory. Now, the picture on the left is from Black Friday, so it's not obviously fully relevant, but it is a little bit similar. There is a huge grab for any available inventory, any available production right now. So if you're able to, try to stock up in bulk and pay your agent ASAP so that they can pay the factory. The reason being is that because of all the production constraints, factories, they're not going to want to work with orders of 50 units at a time. They want to work with orders of 500 or 1,000 at a time, and because of so much demand, and if you don't pay right away, you're going to lose your place in line. So a factory might tell your agent, okay, this is going to take 5 days if you pay right now, and then if you drag your feet and take 3-4 more days to pay your agent, then the factory might say, sorry, you lost your line already. There's 5 other suppliers ahead of you, and now it's 10 days. So just remember, try to invest in more stock and pay as soon as possible. And then generally speaking, if your agent allows it, try to use Yunexpress or any other kind of similar special line that uses freight planes as opposed to passenger flights. We only exclusively use Yunexpress, and as far as we've seen, there have been very, very little disruptions for our Yunexpress service going out of Shenzhen through Hong Kong. And actually, we do have Yiwu fulfillment from the Zhejiang area as well, and actually that is still looking okay, but mostly for EU countries, where there might be some disruptions for other countries outside of the Western EU countries. No matter who you work with, here are some things that you should definitely be doing right now. First of all, communicate. Communicate with your Aliexpress seller, communicate with your supplier. Every product, every factory, every agent, every region is going to be in a slightly different situation. So I'm giving you some data points here, but everyone is different. So make sure you communicate with whoever you're working with and get straight answers out of them. However, don't fully trust what you hear. It's just kind of unfortunate. There is, generally speaking, a lot of lack of transparency with most agents or sellers that you're going to be working with. So even if they're saying everything is fine, start scaling slowly. Don't just start full speed right away. Wait until you actually see things are working, products are actually getting sent out, they're actually leaving the country before you really scale up hard, no matter what your supplier says. Generally speaking, expect production delays, logistic delays, and just overall higher costs. Things are stabilizing but are not completely normal. So no matter what your agent tells you, we're fully transparent with our clients and our situation is fine, but generally speaking, just expect delays and higher costs when you're working with someone else. But one thing to remember is that your competitors are facing the same situation, especially for the same products. Now, this is obviously not a great thing, but it also means that they're also facing the same delays, the same additional costs, and this is all a competitive game. So in terms of who wins out at the end, don't worry that you're going to be somehow behind your competitors who might sell the same kind of product. Also, make an attempt to reduce the numbers of products that you sell, whether it's upsells or cross-sells or whatever. You already know that there's a lot of issues with the supply chain, so even one product is going to have a lot of issues. If you multiply that by multiple products, multiple SKUs, multiple variants, everything just gets much worse. So if you have a strong winning product, just focus on that. You really don't want a bad experience from your upsells to hurt the rest of your store, because your customers are going to give you poor feedback because your upsells are taking forever to deliver, even if your main product is working. And then finally, set expectations with your customers. Trust me, we work with a lot of clients and many customers through them. Customers generally are okay with slower shipping as long as you tell them about it. They only get upset and start charging back if you tell them something and you do not deliver on that. So if you already know from your agent or seller that things are going to be delayed, let your customers know. If normally you promise 1 to 2 week delivery, just say up to 3 weeks for now, right? Always under promise and over deliver. That's really the key to having happy customers, and overall, my belief, it's the way to have to run a better business in general. All right, so that's it for now. Again, this is a super unfortunate situation, and there are obviously a lot of human lives affected. So I really don't want this to be a situation where we're just focused on just business. However, obviously, most of you guys probably run your own businesses, so your own business and your own well-being is also affected as well. So, that's why I'm sharing this video today. So if you like what you see, and if you want to see more updates on this specific situation, please join our Facebook group linked in the description below, where I'll give more up-to-date updates. And if you want to see more videos on operations and logistics in the e-commerce world, specifically focused on China fulfillment, please subscribe to our channel to see more in the future. And then finally, just a small plug for our service. We do run a premium fulfillment service, linked below. If you have more than 50 orders per day and you're ready to scale and you want to work with someone who is fully operational right now, please check out our website, fill out our form. We'll be happy to talk to you. All right, so until next time, this is Dayu from EcommOps. Hope you guys stay safe. Hope the best for you and your loved ones, and hope you guys the best of luck. See you guys next time.